I've noticed it's like a circus in there. That's what I've seen, to be honest, with these interstate buyers advocates. I don't think it's very professional, probably not ethical.
Our motto is buy without regrets, and so
if you can buy a property that will serve you for 10 years as opposed to 3 years, that will serve you well. It's something
buying a great property today, that's not just what it's about. It's also getting something that could be ripe for improvement when the time is right for that investor or for the next buyer.
When you think about, lifestyle, what's important to you? How do you get to work? What do you need for your family? What amenities like parks and shops? Then you look at the budget.
Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. I'm a mortgage broker since 2013. And in this podcast, we're going to be interviewing Australia's leading buyers agents, ones with decades of experience, have the local insider knowledge on the street, and can really help you with your buying process, no matter whether you're a first home buyer, upgrader, investor. In this podcast, you'll get access to Australia's leading buyers agents' minds every week on a Thursday. What's the word on the street? Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. Very excited to do today's episode. We're going to go to a part of Australia that is pretty stunning to live in, a place I've visited many times over the years on sort of family holidays, etc. Michael Ramsay, how you doing?
Yeah, well, thanks, Chris. I'm based in Barwon Heads, which is not that far from Berrigurra, where I grew up on a farm. And I did that for a while in Jackaroo and went over to New Zealand and worked over there and came back and then decided maybe farming wasn't totally for me. And I'd also have to share that responsibility with my brother. Although we're good friends, we decided we couldn't work together perhaps for ever and a day. And at that same time, I happened to see a little advertisement in the Age newspaper for a real estate agent. And I thought, I had a couple of friends selling real estate and I thought, maybe I'll give that a go. And so I applied for the job and got the job and started working in Hawthorn in Melbourne for a company. And that's how my property venture started, selling real estate. I worked for another couple of companies, ended up working for a company called RT Edgar in Toorak, and 18 months later became a partner there. But although it was good fun and you earn a lot of money, it didn't sit that well with me that you were bridging a gap all the time between what you were telling the vendor he might achieve for his property and the buyer. You were telling a buyer that he could possibly purchase the property for a certain amount. And, neither of these scenarios were totally accurate. And so I just had a bit of an ethical and moral problem with that. And so I just decided I didn't really want to do this for the rest of my life. So I might as well bail out now. 10 years is a good time to do that. And then I decided just then, there was one other person who did it at the same time as me, actually. And I didn't know anyone else in Australia doing it. And so that's when I started.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's back in 1998. And so pretty much one of the I hate that word, but the godfathers of buyer's agency. And
well, I was thinking that word today, actually, the godfather.
Yeah, the pioneers, I guess. And I think that's it would have been a strange time, like actually explaining what you did and how you help. I totally get that sort of feeling of want to be on the helping the buyer, because you can just be so straight with the buyer, in the agency world. It's not their fault, but they just have to play those games to sometimes get transactions done. And
they do.
So it sounds like, but I mean, have you always sort of been on the sort of the Surf Coast Bellarine, or were you doing a lot of your buyers agency in the first bit in Melbourne? How's that sort of gone over the last 28 years?
Yeah, I was working, when I was with RT Edgar, I was working, as I said, in the eastern suburbs. So I sort of knew, I put a ring around 10 kilometres from the CBD when I started my buyers agency business, because that's what I knew. And 8 to 10 kilometres, no point going any further than that, because I didn't know that area very well. I couldn't tell people I was an expert in that area, but I had spent 10 years closer to the CBD, so that's where I concentrated. That's where I went and saw all the when I first started to get business. I hit the ground like a Jack Russell, actually, and I went round and saw all the agents in their meetings and offered them 20% of my fee. And then I tell you that because my first client came through a selling agent. And, so some people think, just to go back a step, some people think that, antagonizing a selling agent is the way to, bid at an auction and conduct your business. Is actually not really the right way. But that aside, these people came down from Queensland. This is an example of a buyer's advocate, how useful they can be. And she was sort of 6 months pregnant and her husband was away on business. So anyway, I looked at a whole lot of houses, found this one that they really liked, bid for them at auction. We secured it. Since then, I've done about 4 transactions with them. And so people are very loyal, and I've had wonderful clients throughout the journey in 28 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we see that as well. We had to be in business for 12 years and, it's gone from an apartment to a house, upgrade and reno, and you're kind of part of their long journey. You start to feel a bit old, to be honest, because you're sort of also going through your own journey, but you also get better, I feel. Like, have you felt that, as you sort of evolve, as the industry's evolved, you get more and more market knowledge, you can start to see patterns, and when did you sort of shift down towards more to sort of the Geelong, sort of back to where you grew up?
So I didn't answer the question, but 14 years I had in Melbourne. And then I decided to move down for personal reasons. And also I saw a need down here where I grew up. So we had a holiday house at Bellarine Heads when I was little. And my parents built a house down here. And so I've been down here, roughly 14 years in Melbourne and 14 years down here, servicing the Bellarine Peninsula and the Surf Coast Shire and Geelong. So I do those 3 areas. And I started... When I was in Melbourne, I started in the spare bedroom like everybody does. And then we had an office in Chapel Street in South Yarra. We had about 4 staff. And then as I moved down here, the staff fell off. They went and worked for other buyers advocates, which is sort of the way I wanted to do. So then they had a job. And then I came down here and I had a person working with me for a while. And then I've got a girl, Sonia, who works with me in the office down here.
Yeah, so it's a very topical area we're going to talk about today is obviously the Geelong, Bellarine, Surf Coast, particularly like the Bellarine Peninsula, which, I'll let you explain where that is, but also the Surf Coast. Obviously, a lot's changed with COVID, a lot of people escaping Melbourne, but particularly in the last couple of years, it's been a bit of maybe the last 12 months, a bit of an investor hotspot. Everyone sort of has gone to the Perth, the Adelaides, and a lot of investors, I feel, have been going down to that pocket, the Geelong area. But yeah, explain this sort of the Bellarine Peninsula. A lot of people may not even been there, but sort of what drives that market? What are the sort of places people really want to be? What are sort of the challenges?
Yeah, if you go back to Sea Change, if you ever watched that on telly, I don't know if you did or not, but that little cafe fishery building is still there. And is heritage listed, so that's that's in Bellarine Heads, and so it's just a very old, almost like a country town, but on the seaside, and it's where the Bellarine River comes and meets the ocean. They're called the Bluff, and it's a bit unusual because you do get the ocean and the river side, and it's very popular with families and little kids. It's only got a population of about 5,000 people, and then from Bellarine Heads you go across the Bellarine River to Ocean Grove, and that expands all the way out. It goes in 2 directions, across to St Leonards and around to Port Arlington, where there's a new ferry now that Paul Little's done that goes across to Melbourne. And so then that's one of the reasons becoming quite popular, I think, down here. It's obviously cheaper than the Mornington Peninsula here. In saying that, Bellarine Heads has a median price of about 1.4 million. And Point Lonsdale, which is the next closest price-wise to Bellarine Heads, is about 1.2 million. Mm-hmm. And so the prices are still up there. And then Ocean Grove is the biggest town. It's got about 20,000 people. It's a growth corridor area, so they're building another 10,000 properties by 1946. And will continue. And it's just become very popular. During COVID, I bought a few properties, and these people were buying sight unseen. They were trying to get through the Iron Curtain or whatever it was called, and became more and more popular. People decided they didn't want to live in Melbourne anymore. It's an hour and a half from Melbourne. It's got some of the best golf courses in Australia. It's been voted, Barwon Heads has been voted best golf town in Australia. And they're just little villages where, people don't really mind. There's no real prestige down here. There's just a very casual way of living. And I think people just enjoy that. And then the Surf Coast, that goes from Geelong through to Lorne, along the Great Ocean Road. And that's always been popular, and during summer, these towns explode. Lorne goes from 2,000 people to 30,000 people, and Anglesey is in the middle, and that does the same. But they've always been popular, but I think, like all regional areas, they're just becoming more and more popular because people can work from home, and they just see it as a nice place to live. Geelong has everything you could possibly want, which is only half an hour from all these towns, and that's a big plus. And it's plenty of employment in Geelong. There's plenty of head offices there. WorkSafe and TAC and Cotton On and the Deakin at Gordon, and that's why it's becoming popular, I think. And Barwon Head, a lot of Barwon Heads and Point Lonsdale people, the buyers here from in the Western District, farmers come here and retire.
Yeah,
a lot of them, actually. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is it people still escaping Melbourne, like they're keeping their Melbourne jobs, or are they, travelling 1 or 2 days a week? Do they feel like it's a bit too far for that and they want to be more like Geelong? Like, are they, from the Bellarine and the Surf Coast, is there still the sort of the COVID refugees, the work from home hybrid work, or is it a bit too far for them?
No, a lot of people I know, they travel to Melbourne twice a week at least.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so you've got a lot of younger families, escaping Melbourne sort of city life, but, then just putting up with the commute. It typically was it a lot of the pre-retirees and retirees, though, also moved there, like escaping Melbourne, but still being able to get back and see the kids on weekends if they want. Is that sort of also been driving it?
Yes, there's both. A lady I brought through last week in Port Arlington, she's moving down from Queensland. She used to live in Tasmania and now has decided to, for whatever reason, she's a single girl, she's living here. And then during COVID was a young couple with families. So I've bought across the board. I've bought in nearly every town on the Bellarine and Surf Coast. But they are all different, though. But some are holiday houses that they only come to once a month, maybe. But a lot of them, I just recently also bought a house in Barwon Heads, and those people, that couple I bought an apartment for in Melbourne, and they decided now to live down here because their parents are near here, and they're going to live here. He's going to go to Melbourne twice a week, and she's going to have a job in Geelong. So that all sort of ties in pretty well.
And so what is someone, you got a client brief and they're like, look, we want to escape Melbourne. Why do they usually generally go more towards the Surf Coast versus the Bellarine? Is it purely down to money? Is it due to schools? Is it due to like a different side of community and life? Like, what are some of the major reasons why someone would prefer one over the other?
I have some clients that look in both. So it's not always one or the other, but I think that Surf Coast is definitely a younger demographic. It's a sort of cool place to live. It's the base for Rip Curl and Oakley and, all those areas. Yeah. And you'll find lots of young families in Torquay and that's like it's sort of, and you got the Bells Beach Classic. It's much younger generation. That's why they go. And then Anglesey is similar, but more family. And then Lorne is just one of those places where people have been going their whole life, And
yeah.
For some people, it's a bit far. It's a good 2 hours from Melbourne. And but people who had holiday houses there still have them, or they've passed them on to their, passed them on down the chain to their children.
Yeah.
And so that's that. But I think it's a demographic. I think you're either a Bellarine person or you're that Surf Coast more hip, if I can use that word, type of environment.
Yeah, no, that's good because this is what people sometimes try to figure out, where's their tribe. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of Victoria made some changes with land tax over the last few years. Even the ATO just recently announced some changes around sort of the way they're going to assess whether you can negative gear your holiday homes, etc.
Yeah.
Like, how are these things sort of playing into the overall market down there? Because they're quite big changes, particularly the land tax a few years ago.
The land tax, it's mentioned a lot. I haven't seen a lot of that. It's probably less than 5% why people are selling around here. But, it's not ideal, is it? I mean, there's obviously a lot of people that I probably don't see who say they're just selling because they have to, because they want to buy somewhere else, but they're probably selling because of land tax. But I haven't noticeably seen it, to be honest, in the towns that I buy in. I know most of the people who sell in these towns personally, and I sort of know their situations, and not many of them are land tax, but you'd think there would be. There's obviously a few. I mean, if the children don't want to take on the responsibility of the land tax, then I can see why the parents are selling. I mean, you can't sort of have it both ways.
Maybe it's hit their Mornington Peninsula, maybe a bit harder, maybe because the higher price points, higher land values, maybe. It sounds like it's a bit cheaper, and so maybe the land tax bills aren't really that enormous. Would that be a fair call?
Yes, it is, because, if you've got properties worth between 5 and 15 million, then that's, which we don't, that's a big difference, and that's a big hit, because obviously the more expensive the land, the more money you're paying. And so I think if that was the case around here, then you would see people selling. They just couldn't pay. They just wouldn't be able to pay it. But if you're paying, if you're paying $2,000 or $3,000 extra in land tax down here, it's probably palatable. If you have to pay $50,000 to $100,000 a year extra, that's not so good. I know it's all relative to what you're earning, but still, even people who earn a lot of money think, well, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are using it for a sort of second home, holiday home, and maybe they've got a bit of debt on their home, maybe they've got a bit of debt on the investment, and it just starts to, do you sell your investment, do you sell your home? And, you can see why the Mornington's probably had a bit more of a challenging time,
That has. There's no question, because I know a few people have had to sell because of that. And
yeah.
I think it will start to bite here. As properties become more expensive down here, then more people will sell because of that reason, because they'll, instead of being worth 2 or 3 million, the land down here, or 2 million, it'll be worth 4 million or 5 million, and then that will really bite.
Do you find that, obviously you mentioned about Ocean Grove, like big expansion plan over the next sort of 20 years, but, is there sort of issues when people are sort of, they don't know the areas, they don't sort of know, how close they've got to be close to the shops and the beach and walking? Like, is there often, when you see some, maybe not clients of yours, but other buyers that they're sort of sometimes chasing the wrong properties, and so making some of the common mistakes that the locals don't want down there? Like, what are some of those things the locals just really don't like, in the Bellarine Peninsula?
In regards to the new buyers, you mean, or?
Well, just more like, they don't want to be in this part of the suburb, or these type of properties have got steep blocks or whatever it is. Like, there's usually like some local sort of secrets that the properties they just generally prefer to avoid because they'll pay a premium to, I don't know, be walking to the beach or whatever it might be. Is there a sort of an ideal lifestyle that they're trying to achieve, and they put a lot of value on a property ticking those boxes? Or is it more, a lot of the properties are more matched, and, it's just more about, they're not constantly discounting certain types of locations or properties?
I'd tell you what they do, like what the buyers who are coming down here, what they want to do is walk, if they can, to the beach and to a coffee shop. That's what they want. And that's not always achievable with the budget they've got. And so last month we had this buyer who we showed her 15 properties in 2 days. She was down from Queensland and on a timeline, and she was weighing up. We showed her all these houses. Some were close to the shop, some weren't, some was close to the beach. And anyway, she ended up buying one of the properties we showed her because of the view. The views from Port Arlington, that a lot of people don't know, are unbelievable, of the You Yangs and the bay and the city skyline. And you can get all that for under 1.5 million, which is, well, you can get sometimes you can get that for under $1 million, so that's the difference. But yeah, no, I don't know if there's any particular scenarios where people don't really want to buy or be near, I guess. And there's, with Ocean Grove, you've got Old Ocean Grove and you've got new estates. There's 3 new estates. So there's over 2,000 properties for sale in Ocean Grove at the moment. So, and they turn over. They don't sit around forever either. So there's a lot of activity in that town. So if you're in one of the new estates, you can't walk to the beach and you can't walk to the main street of Ocean Grove. It's too far. So some people say, okay, well, I prefer to have a new house for that price than an old house, and pay more and be near the shops. So it's a real trade-off, isn't it? Like wherever you buy, I guess.
Yeah, so it sounds like obviously there's new estates and there's challenges sometimes with more supply coming, etc. And how does yours say, particularly if the more affluent buyer, the one with money, really wants to be close to the beach and the shops, and so you might find there's two different markets there, right? Someone who's going for something new versus something that's maybe a longer term scarcer asset. Is there a bit of an acreage market down there? I know that places around the Mornington there is, and as you go sort of a bit inland of sort of Geelong, is that a play down there, or do people sort of really just want something closer to the water?
No, there's lifestyle properties for sure, which I've helped people buy and sell, and that's normally under 200 acres. And so, in fact, I'm acting as a vendor advocate at the moment, which is where we help people sell the house. We choose the agent and the commission and the timing and the way we'll sell it. And anyway, I was just looking at some properties. There's about 15 lifestyle properties between that 2 and 5 million for sale just near here. And some of those, people love those properties if they can afford them. But you have to be the type of person who's happy to drive 15, 20 minutes to a shop. But if you like that acreage lifestyle with a swimming pool and horses, there's plenty to choose from, but they're not cheap.
Yeah, it's the you like the lifestyle to drive, but also love your gardens and your maintenance. But it's an amazing life as well. I mean, so you've got your prestige sort of. Is there certain pockets where you get those sort of prestige beach suburbs? Is there some certain pockets where if money isn't a question, that people really gravitate, like you said, to Port Arlington around sort of those views? Is it parts of certain pockets of Barwon Heads or Ocean Grove, or that people will just naturally really gravitate to want to be in that little pocket there?
Yeah, in Barwon Heads, it's near the golf club, so you need deep pockets there. And if you go 200 metres across the next main road, I did a bit of research on this a few years ago, but I just noticed that if you move 200 metres away, then the land price halves incredibly. And then if you go another 200 metres away or 300 metres, it halves again. So further away from the golf club, that's excepting for the river, which is premium as well. So you can be on the river down here. You can't get sea views here, no matter how much money you've got, really. But you can get river views, or you can be near the golf club, which all those houses are between sort of 3 and 6 million, I guess. And in Ocean Grove, if you get views, you can get amazing views of the water in Ocean Grove, but you need to pay again if you want the prestige spot. So that's in Ocean Grove, it's the sea views. It's here, if it's all that to be near the golf club, walking distance is important. And then, Point Arlington, it's to get the best views. You'll pay a premium, obviously. And then, but those three towns, and Point Lonsdale, it's just to be near the township, really. And those prices are, they're all sort of 1 to 2 million as well, if you wanted a half-decent house near the township.
Is there any issues with schooling or childcare or anything for the younger families where they just find it really hard, whether it's primary or high, they find it really hard to sort of be in certain pockets? Like they have to, if you're a young family, you have to live in sort of Ocean Grove or Barwon because your schools are there and you can't live in. Is there some pockets that are not great for younger families but more desirable others?
No, Barwon Heads has got a fantastic primary school.
Yeah.
And they have to accept children who live in Barwon Heads. So they just keep expanding the school. It's blown out to about 400 at the moment, which is a lot for a town that's only got 4,000 people. And so, and the parents, I heard the other day someone saying how fantastic that school is. So it's a really good school. Ocean Grove's got several really good schools. Drysdale, which is a funny town, it sits in the middle. It's not anywhere near the water, but it's got one of the best secondary schools in Victoria. And then secondary schools, there's a bus from all these towns to take you to Geelong Grammar and Geelong College, two of the most prestigious schools in Victoria. And there's a bus that goes from these towns straight to the school, which is pretty handy. And so they do try and look after. No, it's got great kindergartens down here. And yes, as I said, schools are good. But they do try and look after most of the schools in Geelong with a bus. And I think the parents are pretty happy.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be sometimes the challenges, right? When you go, a little bit further away from the city school options. But it sounds like, obviously, I've heard a lot about the sort of the grammar schools in Geelong. I mean, that's been up there as, for the private options. But it sounds like there's also good sort of high schools within the Bellarine as well, right? So if you don't want to go down the private option, And because that can stop a lot of demand, right? If school options aren't great, and people are stuck in the city. How do people sort of think about the sort of the Geelong versus the Surf Coast versus the Bellarine? Like, is it really just come down to whether they want sort of more of a city life, suburban life versus a sort of more of a quieter sort of pace life? Is that sort of where you find the buyer will naturally figure out what suits them? Or is there anything that really drives people to Geelong over sort of the Surf Coast or Bellarine?
Yeah, I think you're either a city person or you're not, Chris. I think Geelong, the new towns, the Geelong West and Geelong East of they're the better suburbs in Geelong. But then, it's like a ripple effect. So the suburbs that are near those suburbs are gaining traction as well. But I know a few people who live in Geelong, but normally they move out further to a township. They seem to enjoy it more, and then it's only 20 minutes into, it's like going to another suburb in Melbourne, really, but, to get to work, and they just want 1 or 2 acres, or they just want to be near the beach. They think, oh, well, if I'm in Geelong, if I go 20 minutes further, I've moved from Melbourne, I might as well live near the water. The kids can walk to the beach and we can go down to the street. It's just a nicer lifestyle, I think. And, that Geelong CBD has huge problems. And so that's not a great draw card until they fix what's going on in there. But the suburbs are very popular near the CBD.
Is it just development there, or what's some of the challenges you see?
I just think it's just a lot of got to be careful a little bit. There's a lot of unemployment. There's quite a lot of drugs. There's a lot of graffiti. There's a lot of closed shops, and people don't go there.
Yeah, okay.
After dark. And so
Gotcha.
It's a bit safer. That's, I could say that, if you're going to go 20 minutes further to Torquay or Barwon Heads or Ocean Grove or, one of those coastal towns, I think. But if you like living in a township, then, that you're always going to do that, I think, for a lot of people. A friend of mine, actually, he had a few acres in Torquay. He's just moved to Geelong and loves it. So, he's thrown his lawnmower out and he's got a couple of pot plants and that's all he's got. So he's like happy as. So people make both changes, I think.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't have to be forever. But you're right. I mean, if I go back on, 10 years ago, like we had a bunch of clients buying the sort of the Geelong, the new towns, the Ripple sides, all around the sort of, not so much in Geelong, but, a lot of the older Heightons and Belmonts and, but I mean, that were a lot of those sort of the, people just escaping Melbourne looking for an alternative option for their budget outside of, the Melbourne inner ring housing market. But the Geelong also, I think it's just become the hot spot for investors, right? And obviously the budget's changed a lot of this probably for the good news, but how have you seen those sort of interstate buyers agents sort of buying sight unseen, and how they're affecting the sort of Geelong market? What have you noticed?
Yeah, I've noticed it's like a circus in there. That's what I've seen, to be honest, with these interstate buyers advocates. I mean, I don't truly understand it, and that's one of the reasons myself and this, and my colleagues started that REBA association, so we can just have buyers agents that we can all work together with. Because one agent told me the other day in Geelong they'd bought 14 properties from a interstate Perth buyers advocate, and she just sent him videos of the property, and then the buyer's agent would just tell the client it was a good buy. But, I don't know if you're adding a lot of value in doing that. I'm not sure, but that's a lot of property. And so I'm guessing nearly half the properties sold in Geelong at the moment are to interstate buyers advocates, sight unseen. So I think that'll drop off with these new rules, to be honest, with the capital gains and the negative gearing and, and the land tax from a few years ago. But yeah, I don't get it really. And I don't think it's very professional, probably not ethical. And I don't know how they can give advice from so far away. But those towns that you all mentioned, those suburbs you all mentioned just then, Rippleside and Belmont, Hyden, East Geelong, West Geelong, I mean, they are really all still great suburbs, and they've all gone up in value, quite a lot in the last, especially I noticed East Geelong is still going up about 10% a year, which is pretty good.
I was talking about is because they were, a lot of beautiful homes in there. There's a lot of older style character homes. And And, you know, when people have, that's what Melbourne's all about, right? You worked there for a long time, so I don't need to tell you that. But, you know, the streetscape, the beautiful sort of heritage features and the sort of, you know, that is just something what people wanted to replicate. And they can replicate that exact type of property down in Geelong. You've got streets and streets of that type of property, right? Like it's a beautiful housing from a heritage point of view down there, right?
Yeah, and you can buy the double-fronted Victorian house, like you're talking about, in there's thousands of them in West Geelong and East Geelong and Newtown. And, you know, for half the price that you'd have to pay in the likes of Toorak or South Yarra or Paran or Fitzroy or somewhere.
Yeah.
And there's no traffic to speak of, really. And, you know, you're 20 minutes from fantastic beaches and golf courses. I think that's what it's all about. And it's a bit safer, arguably, and more grass, more green, you know, parks. And just, I think it's a better lifestyle for the family and the children, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think over time it's gentrifying more and more, right? More people moving down there. The older homes are getting sort of renovated. You know, new people are moving in, and maybe Geelong's got some challenges now, but I mean, there's lots of positives. I think with the overall area, right? It's got a lot of investment. There's a desire to build more hubs outside of Melbourne, right? Rather than just going further and further into the farmland. And Geelong's sort of that number one fit outside of Melbourne. Obviously Ballarat and Bendigo, etc. But Geelong is right up there. Obviously, you got Avalon Airport. Yeah.
It's probably still one of the best places to invest. I mean, I know Ballarat, and I like Ballarat. I don't buy a lot of property there, but, you know, it's been voted 17th, 16th happiest town in Australia. But I'd still invest in Geelong. It's just got so much going for it. They just got to tidy up the CBD a little bit, and then that's, you know, then it's a fantastic city. You know, it's already nearly 300,000 people. It's going to expand to 500,000 in the next 20 years. And so, you know, you can't help but, it's still, in those suburbs especially, you can't help but think it's a solid place to invest in. I mean, there's just too much evidence. There's too much employment. There's too many great beaches and, you know, open area. The foreshore is fantastic. You can jump on a boat to Tassie. You know, you can do anything you want down here.
Yeah, that's right, isn't it? That's where it's going from now. And I think the obviously there's fast rail and all sorts coming up in the future. But, you know, those areas are probably close to the sort of the centre, but they're a little bit further away where it's not too close. But, you know, I do think a lot of these buyers agents you spoke about weren't going to those areas. They were probably going quite a bit far north. They're going a bit further south. They're going a bit more of the cheaper, sort of more affordable parts of sort of Geelong. And because that was where clients' brief were, and that was the pitch where they can get a certain yield that sort of satisfies their sort of investment criteria. And, you know, they're pushing it out where, you know, and creating rental supply in these areas, but it's not typically where a lot of the older wealth was in Geelong. It's probably more on the fringes, and they're probably the cheaper parts for the lower socioeconomic, I guess. Is that sort of what you're seeing as well? Like when you talk about where those buyers agents are buying, they haven't been buying in those because they're often a little bit higher than what they could afford. Or their clients, the pitch was to clients?
Well, yeah, those suburbs and some of the better suburbs, but you're right, the sweet spot was about 700,000. Because I know, because I came up against them a couple of times. But, you know, they're still going to be, they'll be okay, the people who bought those houses, because you know, they'll still go up in value. But it's whether they've done the due diligence that you need in far as this, you know, the structure of the house and whether it's the right property to buy for them, and if there's going to be any problems, if there's a development at the back. And all these, you know, I mean, buyers advocates are all about having someone in your corner that you can contact day and night and not make any mistakes. That's the big, you know, it's people say they help you buy the right house, but they help you not buying the wrong house. That's the big job we do, I think, on the main. But and I didn't want to be too harsh on the other buyers advocates, but, you know, I just can't see the value in paying the money, whatever they charge to secure a house. But they'll probably, the people who purchase them will be okay, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're, and that's what great buyers agents will do, is just the local DD, you know. You won't even look at certain properties in suburbs because, you know, you don't want to buy in that pocket or that street, or it's just, you know, there's something undesirable that you know that is going to hold its growth back. But and then when you do find a property in a suburb, in a street that you like, doesn't mean you buy it. There could be plenty of issues, from a building to a privacy, who knows what else, right? And so you need to, And that's not going to get shown up on a video, and you can't really look at it sometimes on even street view. So, and then obviously, trying to buy fast, right? When you've got to buy so many transactions, you're just going to potentially rush it, whether overpaying, whether you're not negotiating the best terms, or, skipping through contracts. I do think that, you're going to go to drop balls. And I think you're right, though. Like, Geelong's got probably really strong fundamentals. So it's not like it's a market that's, all of a sudden the investors say buy there and no one else wants to buy them. You've still got a lot of people escaping Melbourne, or like you say, moving from other states. A lot of people will go, well, I could cash in and I don't mind a bit of colder weather and it's pretty beautiful down there, and I can go to Melbourne on weekends or go to Tassie or even fly back north in winter. So I think there's a lot to like living down there. How's it go with the agents in the Bellarine and sort of the Surf Coast? I mean, obviously you've been doing a long time now, so they probably know you, and they know how to work with buyers agents. But does that give you a really good advantage than say some out of area buyers agent that's buying there? They just don't know, because they're sort of also coastal sort of community towns. They're probably a little bit extra wanting to know who they work with, they can trust.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a big thing, especially in small towns down here. In Melbourne, I had a very good rapport with agents, and I made that my business, that I would, and not annoy them too much, but, get the job done. But I think it helps so much. Like just lining up those 15 houses we saw in once. If you didn't know the agents, they'd say, honestly, Michael, I mean, this is getting ridiculous now. But I think they do a lot of favours. Tomorrow I'm looking at a couple of houses, with two different agents. I know you can do that anywhere, but it also helps down here. And I do know the agents really well. And, they refer me clients, and we're all sort of family down here, really. But it makes a huge difference if you get along with them. And they tell me about properties that are coming up, and they're good to deal with, They get me through houses any time of day that I want. I mean, I don't push that privilege, but it's available there when I need it. And Chris, I think it makes a huge difference if you've got a good relationship with these guys, and I do, and girls. And it helps the buyer, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right. You said it in a way that, it's like they're looking after, it's a privilege, I guess, if you get through time and trust of dealing with them. And then they're like, well, actually, no, I can get Michael in here early. I know he's not going to stuff me around. I know he's got a buy there ready to go. He'll tell me what he really thinks about it. And, he'll negotiate fair. He won't just play games. And that's what an agent really wants, right? They know the trust that the offer's going to come through, and what they tell their vendor is actually going to happen. They don't want to have egg on their face. So I do think that'd be hard for a new buyer's agent just starting out, and, it takes time.
Yeah, it does take. Yeah. And when quite often, sometimes we buy, because they know I'm going to go ahead with what I say I'm going to pay on behalf of the buyer, sometimes we just text back, we might go up $100,000 in all different configurations, and we just do it by text, not often, but then we formalize it once we bought the property. But it's just, you can get done a lot quicker that way, instead of signing 5 contracts every 5 minutes. You just backwards and forwards. And they said, well, I said, will you take this? This is our last figure. And then they come back, yes, okay, then we'll sign up. Then we sign up an hour later. It's all done pretty professionally. My buyers sort of see all this going on. They think, geez, there's no way I could have done all that. This agent wouldn't have dealt with me like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually, around the trust to be, on text to negotiate, right? Like a lot of you think you're going to get sniped at the 11th hour, if you haven't got a signed contract, and that brings a lot of anxiety for buyers. And maybe other competitive, say more competitive inner city markets, they might be dealing with 3 or 4 different buyers agents. But, I think they'll probably, in these towns, and for you probably got this level of trust to know, yep, that's a deal done. Yeah, you haven't got the signed paperwork, but you know that they're not going to fall over, and they know you're not going to fall over, which, can make a difference, right? Because sometimes you've got to get that vendor to agree at a certain hour of the day, and, signing contracts just isn't that possible straight away.
That's right. And, a little while ago, I was helping a friend of mine's daughter and son-in-law buy a place. And so I sort of knew the agents, and they started, after we passed it in after an auction, and they went down the track of there was someone outside who'll pay more if we don't pay it, this sort of thing. And I said, listen, let's just park that person outside for a second, because if he was going to bid, he would have bid. And I just need to you to concentrate on me, and me, you. And anyway, it took an hour and a quarter later, but we bought the property. But I think you can sort of stop them in their tracks a little bit if they know you and say, right, look, just let's not talk about someone else who might buy this property. We just want to do it here and now. And we went backwards and forwards for quite a while, but I knew the agent. He knew that, I wasn't really mucking him around. I was giving him offers where the property was worth, and the deal was done. Everyone was happy, at the end. But it took a bit longer than normal, but it just helped the buyer, and didn't antagonize anybody. I just told it the way it was.
Yeah, sometimes the agent's got to get their vendor over the line, right? They're the one that's stopping things, and some really good feedback, and they can actually use your pitch and your offer, and I'm sure you're helping them condition the vendors to the market and what it's actually worth. And that's another benefit of a great buyer's agent, I feel, is that the agent can actually sometimes work together with to motivate the vendor to actually get a deal done, rather than hoping for some wishful outcome that may or may not happen, right? Michael, I'd absolutely be super comfortable referring any client to you, and I think anyone listening to this, you'd be in very safe hands on the Bellarine, Surf Coast, even Geelong, and I really appreciate the chat today.
No, it's been great. I could talk for you for another hour, I reckon, but maybe next time. I appreciate
good.
the opportunity, Chris.
Appreciate it, Michael. Talk soon. Thanks so much for listening today. We hope you got lots of value out of it. If you'd like to speak to our guest today, there's links in the show notes on how you can get in contact. And if you're buying your first home, upgrading, renovating, or need any finance-related queries, obviously we'd love to help. There's links in the show notes to us as a mortgage broker, and we look forward to next week's episode.